to Hilary Fordwich right now, a noted royal watcher. Hilary, we knew this day was coming. It seemed to come very fast this particular week. As I said, with Greg, she was meeting with Liz Truss, the new prime minister, and allowing her to form a cabinet and get another government going, as she had with 14 other prime ministers. Do we know what exactly happened here, what she was battling?
Well, Neil, you're absolutely right. Liz Truss went to Balmoral on Tuesday. It's actually formally known as a long-standing tradition, the kissing of the hands. No longer the actual kissing of the hands. Historically, the Prime Minister did used to kiss the monarch's hand. The Queen obviously has had mobility problems. She loved to ride. She would always ride at Balmoral, and she hasn't this year. The mobility issues had gotten the best of her, most unfortunately. We don't have many more issues or information about the issues that her health had taken such a downturn. But Neil, if I might take this moment to mention to our American audience, there's some things I don't know if many Americans actually know that, for example, 9/11, the Queen had the Guard play the American national anthem right outside of Buckingham Palace. So she had a great affinity for the US, and there were things that she did in moments like that. And I hope that at this time, what we all take away from this is her incredible sense of duty. And may we all look to her as somebody who didn't talk about herself, who didn't focus on her own issues. We didn't know a lot about her health because she didn't talk about it. She didn't complain, and she didn't explain.
That's a good way to put it. She didn't complain, she didn't explain. But Hilary, I'm always fascinated by the number of prime ministers, number of presidents she's met. And she never tipped her political hand, who she leaned toward. Her official duty was allowing an outgoing prime minister to leave and an incoming one to set up, a cabinet and get things going. I don't remember an occasion where she said, no, I'm thinking twice, you're not going to set up, I don't like you. And she had no power in that regard. But it was that official duty that she took very, very seriously. And she looked askance at any family members who veered into areas she didn't think they belonged. Could you explain that to me?
Yes, a few things there, Neil. In fact, actually, you mentioned about the longevity of her reign. Don't forget, her first prime minister was Winston Churchill.
Wow.
Anybody under the age of 80 probably certainly doesn't remember any other monarch. Her father, King George VI, she did come to the throne at a very young age. It was at 21 that she said, whether her life be long or short, that she would consider her duty to serve. And she invited the entire Commonwealth to serve with her. She was also dedicated to the Commonwealth, very importantly. I think it's interesting, actually, to think about what President Trump said, actually, immensely recently. He was on GB News Today. I've heard lots of this from the UK. And he was asked about his meeting with her. And he said that he pressed her a number of times as to who her favorite American president was. And she said, I liked them all. And he asked again, who was your favorite American president? And she said, I liked them all. And then he asked her about her favorite president, about her English favorite prime minister. And she said, oh, I love them all. So there were even incidences where perhaps it was allegedly she didn't get along with Margaret Thatcher. She actually attended Margaret Thatcher's funeral. And I think part of that was to make a point that, no, she did not play favorites. And again, she rose above politics. But Neil, it's very important to remember for our American audience, she was head of state. Head of state means that you should rise above politics. And many Americans actually ask me, well, what is it like to have a monarch? And, oh, we don't have a monarch. But Neil, no matter what any American thinks of our president, remember, there's always somebody else who doesn't like that president. We're a very polarized nation. It's rather lovely from the British perspective to have the head of state and the head of government be separate. That's one of the unique, wonderful things if you have a monarch that does make everybody proud.
The one thing that comes through, Hilary, in researching and going over her incredible life is the fact she didn't grant any interviews to media figures. She would make speeches and an annual Christmas address. I know that was highly valued by the British people and around the world. It would be closely scrutinized. But she avoided the media. And knowing the media, as I'm one of them, I could see why. But that was very deliberate, wasn't it?
It was. Actually, though, there are times where she has made commentary. You can see them, particularly with regard to her coronation. And she was shown her crown, and she was talking about how heavy it was. So you actually can find quite a bit online about her, with her speaking about her role and about how she has viewed things. She doesn't really talk about her feelings, but she did view things in a certain manner, and she would address those. Family was extremely important to her. The family of the Commonwealth was extremely important to her. And I think the message that we could take away from her entire reign was that of forgiveness. She actually was a very religious lady, and she practiced forgiveness, even with her own family. And by the way, the Duke of Sussex was invited up there. Prince Harry was invited up to Balmoral, and all the grandchildren gather up there. He had been invited, and with his children, now they chose not to, they chose to do other things, but they were invited, and she was always extending olive branches. I think that's very important for us all to remember, to admire, and hopefully to practice.
You know, much has been made, Hilary, of the fact that Prince William, rushed to Balmoral. We do know that Harry did. Neither of their wives did, though. And was that by design? A lot of people were trying to read into stuff like that, but it was just the immediate family, was it not?
Well, I think correct, Neil. I do think, yes, it was just her immediate children and her immediate grandchildren. Why? This is a time when family comes first. And I don't think that there was anything particularly of any slight. The Duchess of Cambridge, of course, has 3 young children. And of course, the heir to the throne there, young Prince George. So she had to be taking care of them from school also. And of course, this happened and occurred in the evening in England. Right. And of course, Balmoral at Scotland.
I'm curious now, this so-called London Bridge planning for this 10-day event. We don't know anything like it in this country. The closest we had to that was a rushed together funeral after the tragic killing of John F. Kennedy in 1963, where his wife, Jackie Kennedy, put together an amazing remembrance of her husband with a casket a caisson that carried the coffin of Abraham Lincoln. But she scrambled to put that together and give it the dignity that it was due. But it was her planning and putting it together fast with the burial at Arlington Cemetery. In your case, in Britain's case, these are well-planned events. You can't plan, obviously, for an assassination, but human beings die, and they were ready and planning for this, right?
Absolutely. By the way, when you happen to mention JFK's funeral, a couple of points here. Well, we all know the photograph that stole that little John saluting his father's casket. One thing a lot of people don't really know is that when Jackie went to the UK, she went to near Runnymede. There is a memorial to JFK, and that's where the Queen actually decided that would be erected. And Prince Philip took hold of little John's hand, realizing that he didn't have a father. And when Prince Philip passed, of course, that was something that has affected the Queen drastically. I thought of that immediately, of how sensitive a man he was. But yes, London Bridge is the plan. The reason they're all, Neil, referred to as bridge plans, with different bridges named, is because it's a bridge to the next world. And it has been planned for a very long time. What is very interesting and very sad and yet poignant for us all to know is that, of course, the Queen had input into it all. So when we watch it, we'll know that this is the Queen's desire, just like Prince Philip's funeral, that was of his desire. There are certain facets that many of us can anticipate. Obviously, Jerusalem is a hymn that is sung about England's green and pleasant lands that will no doubt be in the ceremony. I Vow to Thee, My Country is also another hymn that brings a tear to anybody British's eyes. There are certain traditions that are at funerals. They're at Margaret Thatcher's funeral, they're at Winston Churchill's funeral, state funerals, as well as, of course, she will pick her own hymns and her own music. And there will be heads of state. President Biden is purported to be in attendance, and heads of state from around the world. We, in our lifetimes, Neil, won't probably ever see anything else like this. And I will actually quote a historical quote here from King Farouk, who once said, he was talking about all the monarchies in Europe and when they were all falling after the First World War and Second World War. And one of the things he said, there will come a time where there will only be 4 kings, the King of Spades, the King of Hearts, the King of Clubs, and he named all those in a pack. And he said, and the King of England, what he didn't realize then was, of course, it would be the Queen of England. And we should all recognize she is one of those queens that is still in existence and special for the world.
Can you educate me, Hilary? I know we were mentioning about the JFK funeral, the closest thing we had to something of this magnitude. That lasted over 3-4 days. This is 10 days. Obviously, they've got a tick-tock on this for every day, I would imagine, in the details. We don't know what the Queen's intentions or wishes were or are, but do we know anything at this point?
Well, we do. We do know that, and it's always a very sad time, Neil, but it's also a time of also like a sort of a sad rejoicing. One of the things that's wonderful about monarchy is the continuity. Of course, Prince Charles now is King Charles III, and that's what he will go by. So there also needs to be also that ceremony. The coronation won't be for many, many months, but he will ascend as king. So we will see his leadership set in. We will also see quite a lot of presence from Prince William, who will be taking on a number of the special roles that the royal family will have behind closed doors. They are currently all at Balmoral. They will remain at Balmoral privately as a family initially before they do return to London, but everything else will return in London. Interestingly, though, also there will be services and there will be events in, of course, every capital of all of the other countries that make up Great Britain, obviously in Northern Ireland, in Wales, and in Scotland as well.
Amazing. Man, Hilary, you are a walking Britannica. Thank you very, very much. I have a great appreciation of the magnitude that awaits Brits right now on this sad occasion. And the 10 days are running. Hilary Fordwich, a royal watcher extraordinaire.